I stood before the heavy mahogany door of a luxury estate I knew all too well in Greenwich, Connecticut. The exhaustion accumulated during the long flight into JFK vanished in an instant, replaced by an incomprehensible desolation. I inserted the key into the lock, turned it once, then again, but the door remained as immovable as a castle wall. Convinced I couldn't have made a mistake, I tried again, but the result was the same. The door was deadbolted from the inside. A vague unease began to seep into my mind. I had returned a day early on purpose to surprise my husband, Chris. Over our 7 years of marriage, these romantic surprises had become increasingly rare, but I wanted to rekindle the spark between us. However, the first surprise of the day seemed to be for me. I took out my phone and dialed Chris's number. It rang long and nervously. He didn't answer until the 5th ring. His voice sounded strangely rushed and flustered. "Hey, Charlotte, are you done with work already?" "Well, I just got back. I'm at the front door. Why is it deadbolted from the inside?" I tried to keep my voice as calm as possible. There was a silence of several seconds on the other end of the line. In the distance, I could hear the murmur of crashing waves and loud thumping music. Chris wasn't in any boardroom. My heart began to beat at an irregular rhythm. "Oh, it's just that I'm in a really important meeting with a partner. I probably won't be back until late tonight. Grab an Uber and go to your parents' house in Brooklyn for the night. Okay, I'll come see you tomorrow without fail." His voice was heavy with falsehood. Every word he spoke was a needle stabbing my trust. "And where is this loud meeting that sounds like you're at the beach?" I asked, feeling a chill run down my spine. "I'm at a corporate retreat in South Beach, Miami." "Ah, my boss is calling me. I gotta go. I'll call you tonight. I love you." He hung up hastily, not giving me time to ask anything else. "I love you." How empty and nauseating those 3 words sounded in my head. I had heard them thousands of times over the last 7 years, but they had never made me want to gag as much as they did today. Helpless, I dragged my suitcase toward the entrance of the gated community. I was about to order an Uber to my parents' house when Frank, the community security guard making his rounds, saw me and greeted me warmly. "Well, Mrs. Montgomery, you're back from your business trip. You look great." "Hi, Frank." "Yes, just got in." I forced a smile. "Say, Frank, by any chance was there anyone at my house today? How come you didn't go on the trip with the family?" The guard looked at me, eyes wide with surprise. "Yesterday morning, I saw Mr. Montgomery taking his parents and the rest of the family to JFK. They were proudly telling me they were all heading to St. Bart's for a week to celebrate some great news. A very young, pretty girl was with them too. From what they told me, she was Mr. Chris's fiancé, and there was a huge announcement, a pregnancy, so they were all going to celebrate together. The older Mr. Montgomery was absolutely thrilled, said he was finally getting a grandson. I congratulated him, of course. Every word out of the guard's mouth was a hammer blow to my skull. Great news, fiancé, pregnancy, St. Bart's, the whole in-law family. My mind turned into a chaotic, terrifying whirlwind of information. The curtain of lies carefully woven by my husband and his family had just been ruthlessly torn down by an oblivious third party. I don't remember how I said goodbye to the guard. When I regained my senses, I was back in front of that mahogany door with a terrifying determination in my eyes. I had to get inside that house. I needed to know the truth. I called a locksmith. My voice sounded so cold and resolute that it surprised even me. The pain and betrayal were slowly condensing into a dark force ready to destroy everything. The storm inside me had only just begun. The locksmith, after battling the deadbolt for nearly 20 minutes, wiped his sweat, took his payment, and left in a hurry as if he had sensed the suffocating air that oppressed me. A heavy metallic click announced the lock had given way. I pushed the door open carefully and stepped into the house I had always proudly called my home. The scent of the lilies my mother-in-law arranged every week hit my nose, but today even that perfume made me nauseous. The house was empty, but there were signs of a hasty departure everywhere. Pillows thrown haphazardly on the sofa, a half-drunk glass of water on the coffee table. My heart raced as I approached the wall where our family portraits hung, and there I froze. Between our wedding picture and the photos of our recent family vacations, a brand new frame had been placed in the center spot. In the picture, the entire Montgomery family was smiling radiantly at the airport. My father-in-law, my mother-in-law, my brother-in-law, his wife, and Chris. Chris was right in the middle, one hand on his mother's shoulder, and the other wrapping around the waist of a young, unknown woman. The woman wore a triumphant smile, and her thin dress clearly revealed a swelling baby bump. They looked like a perfect, happy, authentic family. And I, the legal wife, was nothing but an unnecessary spectator, a nuisance. A shudder ran down my spine. I covered my mouth with my hand to stifle a sob. Stumbling, I walked into Chris's home office where we kept our shared iMac. With trembling fingers, I typed in the password. Our wedding anniversary. As soon as the screen woke up, the first thing I saw was a confirmation for a reservation at a 5-star luxury resort in St. Bart's, booked under the name Chris Montgomery. Guests Chris Montgomery, Mia Brooks. Couples oceanfront suite. Duration: 1 week. A hot tear finally rolled down my cheek. I clicked on the shared family cloud application, the very space I used to show off to my friends displaying our happy moments. And then the true hell unfolded before my eyes. In a folder named Street, Bart's family celebration, hundreds of photos were uploading in real time. Chris feeding that woman. My mother-in-law walking on the beach, hand in hand with her, giving her the same tender look she would give a daughter. My father-in-law with his hand hovering over her belly, smiling with deep satisfaction. The whole family toasting with flutes of champagne. Chris and this Mia were seated at the head of the table. They were happy, having fun, celebrating their ultimate betrayal. In their world, I had been completely erased. I clicked through the photos one by one, feeling my heart rip to shreds. There was a close-up of Mia's face. She had sharp eyes and a smile that, while pretending to be innocent, was fiercely provocative. It was as if she were looking right at me, mocking my stupidity and ignorance. There were also short video clips, loud laughter, my mother-in-law's voice calling Mia our beautiful new daughter-in-law, Chris's voice promising that as soon as he got everything sorted out, he would give the mother and child the place they deserved. Everything sorted out. That everything was me, an obstacle that needed to be removed from their path to happiness, a problem to be solved. 7 years of love, 7 years of dedication, 7 years of sacrifice. It had all been reduced to this horrifying truth. Not only had my life partner betrayed me, but his entire family had too, the very people I had respected and loved as if they were my own parents. I slammed the laptop shut. The sound echoed in the silent room. The truth, cruel and undeniable, had been revealed. My tears stopped. In their place, from the very depths of my soul, a violent flame of hatred began to burn. If they wanted a war, they would get one. And it was a war I was not going to lose. When the initial shock passed, a terrifying emptiness took over. I slumped onto the cold, hardwood floor, leaning against the wall, staring blankly into space. I reconstructed everything in my head, looking for the red flags I had ignored. Chris's frequent urgent phone calls, his sudden business trips, the expensive gifts my mother-in-law boasted an investor friend had given. Chris. They were all pieces of an elaborate fraud in which I had been the only blind spectator. With heavy steps, I walked out onto the balcony and took a deep breath of the cool Connecticut night air. The city lights flickered in the distance, but to me everything looked ashen gray. Just then I saw my neighbor from the estate across the street walking her golden retriever. Seeing me, she waved. "Oh, Charlotte, you're back. I thought you'd gone with the family." I could barely manage a crooked smile. "Yeah, I had to come back early for work." The woman approached the property line and, looking a bit uncomfortable, lowered her voice. "Charlotte, don't get mad at me for telling you this, but the other day before they left, your mother-in-law came over and wouldn't stop bragging about Chris's new girlfriend. How beautiful and charming she is, and how she was finally going to give the Montgomery family their long-awaited heir. She told me your marriage had been broken for a long time, that it was only a matter of time before you guys ended up in divorce court. I felt awful for you hearing that. Anyway, whatever happens, hang in there." Every one of her words was a razor blade, severing the last thin thread of patience I had left. The glass had shattered. Not only had they deceived me behind my back, but they had actively engaged in a public smear campaign to humiliate me. The woman I had respected so much, my mother-in-law, had been broadcasting that our marriage was dead while I was working myself to the bone for what I thought was my family. I thanked my neighbor mechanically and went back inside. The pain was gone. My broken heart no longer existed. Only ice-cold reason remained. They hadn't left me any way out, so I had no reason to show them the slightest ounce of mercy. My first move was to check my financial status. I opened the Chase banking app on my phone. In our joint checking account, where we had saved over $400,000 during our 7-year marriage, only a few $100s remained. The transaction history was filled with massive wire transfers and withdrawals made over the last 2 months, all perfectly timed during my business trips. The beneficiary was an unknown name, Mia Brooks. But it didn't stop there. I checked the credit cards. Chris's American Express limit was practically maxed out, with charges from luxury boutiques, Michelin-starred restaurants, and exorbitant travel expenses. He had been financing his double life with our money, with my blood, sweat, and tears. My fury reached its peak. They hadn't just been unfaithful. They had defrauded me to my face. They intended to strip me of everything I owned, and then throw me out on the street empty-handed. A tremor of absolute disgust and hatred racked my body. No, I am not going to let them get away with this. I sat down at the mahogany desk and opened my laptop. My fingers flew fast and decisively across the keyboard. I began researching top-tier divorce attorneys and legal procedures for asset protection in New York and Connecticut. Pain had transformed into action. Tears had given way to a meticulous, ruthless plan for revenge. They had taught me a valuable lesson about betrayal. Now it was my turn to teach them a lesson about consequences. Night fell completely, but I couldn't sleep a wink. The spacious estate had become a cold prison. I couldn't bear to be there a second longer. I packed a suitcase with some clothes and, most importantly, all the relevant legal and financial documents I could find in the office. Before leaving, I took one last look at the house. Our wedding portrait on the wall seemed to mock me. Without hesitation, I took it down and threw it in the trash. I had to break with everything. I drove aimlessly while tears of pure anger streamed down my face. Finally, my SUV rolled to a stop at the only place I could think of, my parents' brownstone in Brooklyn Heights. My mother was horrified to see my miserable state in the middle of the night. She hugged me tight, asking with deep concern, "Charlotte, what happened? Are you okay? Where is Chris?" I couldn't speak. I just cried in the warm embrace of my mother. My dad came out of his study, his expression hardening the moment he saw me. Having worked his entire life as a ruthless corporate attorney, dealing with every type of human scum, he knew instantly that something catastrophic had occurred. "Come inside, sweetheart. Tell us everything. Take your time." My dad's voice was deep and warm, carrying a strange, calming power. Under the amber glow of the living room lamps, I told them the whole story. The dead-bolted door, the family's trip to St. Bart's, the pregnant mistress, the photos, and the drained bank accounts. I started out sobbing, but my voice grew clearer and firmer as I spoke. The initial weeping was transforming into sharp, focused rage. When I finished, my mother was trembling with fury. My God, how can people be so shameless, an entire family conspiring to trick my daughter? "Oh, my poor Charlotte, what you must have gone through," she cried, holding me. My dad didn't say a word. He sat in his leather armchair, his hands steepled together, his eyes razor-sharp. His silence was more terrifying than 1,000 reprimands. When my tale ended, he slowly opened his mouth, and every word was a verdict. "Sweetheart, listen to me very carefully. First, you have cried and suffered enough. From this moment on, you have to be made of steel. You have done nothing wrong. They are the ones who acted with malice. You cannot break down." I nodded quickly, wiping my tears. "Second," my dad continued, "we are not going to let them walk away with this. This isn't just a simple adultery case. It's organized fraud, embezzlement of marital assets. Depending on what we find, there could be federal wire fraud charges involved. Your father is not going to let them treat you like roadkill." "But Dad, what do I do now? Where do I even start?" I asked, my voice still slightly raspy. "The first thing you need is a bulldog of a lawyer. A very, very good one." My dad looked me straight in the eyes. "This can't be resolved with feelings anymore. It must be resolved legally. Do you remember Nick, my old partner's son? He was your classmate in high school? Right now, he is one of the most vicious divorce and asset recovery attorneys in Manhattan. He's brilliant, ruthless, and he won't let them take a dime from you." I remembered Nick Adams. We went to high school together and got along quite well. He was intelligent and witty, but also blunt to a fault. I had heard he went to an Ivy League law school and was making a massive name for himself. I'm calling Nick right now. He'll be here first thing in the morning. Meanwhile, you rest. This is going to be a long war, and you need your strength. My father's determination and my mother's love fueled me. I was no longer alone. I had my family backing me, a newly formed, impenetrable alliance. That night, I slept in my childhood bedroom under my parents' protection. And tomorrow at dawn, my war would begin. A war to reclaim my justice, my honor, and everything that rightfully belonged to me. It wasn't even 8 a.m. when the doorbell rang. Nick arrived earlier than expected. The lanky teenager with thick glasses I remembered had transformed into an imposing man wearing a bespoke Tom Ford suit. Only his gaze, sharp and penetrating behind his designer frames, remained the same. "Good morning, sir, ma'am." "And hi, Charlotte." Nick greeted my parents with a nod of respect and then turned to me. For a fraction of a second, I saw a flash of empathy in his eyes, but it was quickly replaced by the intense focus of a shark smelling blood. Your dad brought me up to speed, Charlotte. Let's get straight to the point. This isn't the time for mourning. It's time for action. I need you to tell me the entire story in agonizing detail. Leave nothing out. Sitting across from Nick, I told the story again, this time with no tears or sobs, just a cold clinical recounting. I showed him the iCloud photos, the resort reservation, and the screenshots I had taken of the drained Chase Bank statements. My dad sat next to us, chiming in with legal perspectives as a veteran attorney. As I spoke, Nick typed furiously on his iPad. The more he heard, the darker his expression became. When I finished, he looked up. His gaze was as sharp as a scalpel. The situation is much more severe than I thought, Nick said bluntly. This isn't a standard at-fault divorce filing. This is an organized conspiracy to commit fraud. They meticulously planned to bleed your marital estate dry, but they made a fatal mistake. They were arrogant and they left a massive paper trail. Nick turned his iPad toward me. On the screen was a clearly drawn mind map. Here is our strategy. We strike on 3 fronts. First, the adultery and the egregious marital waste. The photos, the videos, the neighbor's testimony, and the resort receipts are more than enough. In New York and Connecticut, we can file for an at-fault divorce citing egregious conduct which will heavily skew the equitable distribution of assets in your favor. My heart pounded. Second, Nick continued, and this is the absolute kicker, the financial front. We need to prove Chris has embezzled marital funds, hidden assets, and potentially committed identity theft if he forged your signature to secure any lines of credit. You said he's the CEO of his family's enterprise, right? We are going to demand a forensic audit of that company. I suspect he's used corporate funds to buy that mistress, a condo, or a car. But how are we going to get that information? I asked, worried. Right at that moment, the doorbell rang again. My mother opened it, and in walked my cousin Ryan. He was in plain clothes, but his posture and the holstered badge on his belt didn't hide his profession. He was a detective with the FBI's white-collar crime task force in New York. Uncle, I came as soon as you texted, Ryan said, looking at me with concern. You holding up Char, I'm surviving? I shook my head. Ryan, perfect timing. We need your federal reach, my dad said, explaining the situation. Hearing the details, my cousin's face hardened into stone. He patted my shoulder and turned to Nick. What do you need me to pull? A lot, Nick said with a calculating grin. First, I need a full background check on Amia Brooks. I guarantee this woman is not a saint. Second, run all real estate and vehicle DMV transactions under Chris Montgomery or Mia Brooks for the last 24 months. Third, see if you can pull any strings to look into the Montgomery Enterprises tax filings. Ryan nodded without hesitation. Done. This is family. Give me 24 hours to get the preliminary intel. As for Chris Montgomery's cheating, I don't even need to run a background check on that. Word on the street is he's always been a serial philanderer. Only my poor cousin Charlotte here was too trusting to see it. My cousin's words were another dagger in my heart, but a necessary one to snap me fully out of my delusion. And the third front, Nick concluded, is the psychological strike. We act fast with overwhelming force, giving them zero time to react. While they're sipping margaritas in St. Tumans, Bart's, we are going to build a steel trap here on the East Coast. When they get back, they will have absolutely nothing. That night, the lights in my parents' brownstone stayed on until the early hours. The house had become a military command center. My dad, the veteran attorney, was the strategic advisor. Nick, the commander-in-chief, planning every tactical strike. Cousin Ryan, the reconnaissance unit, gathering federal-level intel. And I, the aggrieved victim, had become the secret weapon of this war. The fire of hatred burning inside me was no longer consuming me. It was illuminating the path of the devastating counterattack that was about to unfold. The next morning, while I was reviewing documents with Nick and my dad, my phone buzzed. It was Chris. I felt my stomach drop and a wave of nausea hit me. I looked at Nick in a panic. He gestured for me to calm down and whispered in my ear, "Answer it. Act. You are the loving, worried wife. Do not raise a single red flag. If you can cry, even better. Drag the call out and put it on speaker." I took a deep breath, compartmentalizing my rage. I swiped to answer and deliberately made my voice tremble. "Hi, honey. Baby, were you asleep? I'm so sorry, I was in back-to-back meetings all day yesterday and couldn't call you back." Chris's voice on the other line was sickeningly sweet, perfectly hypocritical. "It's okay," I forced a fake sob. "I was just so worried about you. Aren't you exhausted with all those meetings? Please take care of yourself." Nick gave me a thumbs up, mouthing perfect. I'm fine, don't worry. I'm almost done here. I think I'll be able to fly back to you in a couple of days. He lied without missing a beat. You're at your parents' house, right? Yeah, I'm here. I was too scared to stay in the big house alone, I continued the performance, adding a touch of fragility and dependence just like I used to do. Hey honey, I checked our Chase app yesterday and I think there's a glitch. Almost all our savings are gone. I'm really freaked out. I cast the bait. There was dead silence for several seconds. I could practically see the panic washing over his face. That's money I moved for a massive investment opportunity. I wanted to surprise you when I got back. Don't worry, it's going to triple in no time. My beautiful wife doesn't have to worry her pretty little head about a thing. Oh, thank God. I thought our accounts were hacked or something. Well, keep working hard. I won't bother you anymore. I love you. As soon as I hung up, I felt all my energy drain as if I had just fought a physical battle. Faking devotion to the man who had destroyed me, telling someone I despised to his core that I loved him, it felt worse than torture. Flawless. Nick clapped my shoulder. He just lied across state lines to conceal the depletion of marital assets. That shows intent to defraud. He thinks you're still completely under his spell. That is our ultimate advantage. Let him get cocky. My dad nodded. Now the most critical step is for you to go back to that house in Greenwich. His home office, the documents in his personal safe, that's where the kill shot evidence is going to be. But how am I going to go? I can't go back there alone. The mere thought of returning to that house of lies made my skin crawl. You're not going alone, Nick said firmly. I'm going with you. We are going in the capacity of attorney and client to retrieve personal property and financial documents in anticipation of divorce litigation. It is 100% legal. Plus, I've hired a forensic IT specialist. He's going to mirror every single hard drive on Chris's computer, including the deleted files. Nothing will escape us. The plan was set in motion. That very afternoon, Nick, the IT expert, and I returned to the scene of the crime. I would have to face the memories and the suffocating pain of that place again. But this time, I wasn't alone. I was turning the exact site of my betrayal into ground zero of his downfall. My Oscar-worthy performance had begun, and I would play the devastated innocent wife until the final curtain dropped and the guilty paid in blood. That afternoon, the air inside the Greenwich estate felt just as cold as the night before. While the IT expert cloned Chris's hard drives, Nick and I meticulously searched his office. Behind a framed diploma, we found a wall safe. Do you know the combination? Nick asked. I shook my head, but suddenly a string of numbers flashed in my mind. Mia's birthday. I remembered seeing it on a flight confirmation on the computer the night before. I punched it in with trembling fingers. The safe beeped and clicked open. Inside, there wasn't much cash, but it was stuffed with commercial loan contracts and collateral agreements I had never seen before. The most horrifying discovery was that on the lines labeled guarantor and co-signer, my signature had been clumsily forged. I felt my heart stop. Chris hadn't just cheated on me. He had tried to bury me in millions of dollars of corporate debt, turning me into an unknowing accomplice to bank fraud. Nick carefully photographed every single page. Gotcha. This is the smoking gun, he said, unable to hide his vicious excitement. Forging a spouse's signature to secure commercial credit is a federal felony. The Montgomery family is not walking away from this one. We packed everything up and left the estate immediately. We had barely arrived back at my parents' brownstone and poured a glass of water when the doorbell rang aggressively. My mother looked through the peephole and her face went rigid. It's your mother-in-law. My dad and I exchanged a look, then turned to Nick. He smiled wickedly, grabbed my iPhone, turned on the voice memos app, and discreetly slipped it into the pocket of my cardigan. Here we go. Let the show begin. Stay perfectly calm and let her talk. The more she talks, the more she hangs herself. My mother opened the door, and Linda Montgomery stormed into the house like a hurricane. Far from her usual elegant country club demeanor, today she looked unhinged and furious. As soon as she saw me without even acknowledging my parents, she pointed a manicured finger in my face. What are you doing here? Who gave you permission to leave the house? Linda, this is my parents' house. Where else am I supposed to go? I tried to keep my voice steady. Don't you dare act innocent with me. I've never had a worse daughter-in-law, she shrieked. Chris told me everything. You've been living off our dime, doing nothing all day, and throwing psychotic, jealous tantrums. You are not worthy of my son. My dad shot up from his chair, his face red with rage. Linda, watch your mouth. This is my house, and you will not disrespect my daughter under my roof. Oh, look at the big bad lawyer defending his precious little girl, my mother-in-law sneered. Well, let me make this crystal clear. My Chris has found someone infinitely better. Mia is beautiful, charming, and most importantly, she is carrying the long-awaited heir to the Montgomery dynasty in her womb, so your daughter better step aside quietly. She threw a manila folder onto the coffee table. This is a separation agreement my lawyers drafted. Sign it. We're offering you an $800,000 condo in Queens as compensation for your lost youth. Take it and get out of our sight. Do not make me do this the hard way. That little department head job you love so much at your publishing house, I can make a few calls and have you blacklisted from the industry tomorrow. I stared at the joke of a settlement agreement and then at the brazen face of the woman I had once catered to. Honestly, bile rose in my throat, but I remembered Nick's instructions. I took a deep breath, looked her dead in the eyes, and spoke in a voice of absolute ice. Linda, are you done speaking? Because if you are, you can leave. I am not signing this garbage. I am not accepting your condo, and as for the divorce, my attorney will see yours in court. What her expression was pure shock. She had never imagined that her normally docile, submissive daughter-in-law would dare speak to her in that tone. As she drew breath to scream at me again, Nick stepped out from the hallway. In his hand, he held his own phone, the screen clearly showing an active audio recording. Mrs. Montgomery, good afternoon. I am Nick Adams, Charlotte's legal counsel. Every threat, coercion, and attempt at extortion you have uttered since trespassing into this home has been recorded. New York is a one-party consent state, meaning this tape is highly admissible and will make excellent evidence for both the divorce judge and the district attorney. Thank you so much for taking the time to hand-deliver us this gift. My mother-in-law's face went from flushed crimson to ghost white. She stammered, pointing a shaking finger at us, and then stumbled backward out the door, throwing a string of incoherent insults over her shoulder. The heavy door slammed shut. I collapsed into my chair, shaking from head to toe. Nick stopped the recording and beamed. The evidence literally walked itself right to our front door. Next step we go, introduce ourselves to the future Mrs. Montgomery. That night, Cousin Ryan sent Nick a thick, encrypted dossier. The background check on Mia Brooks was incredibly revealing. She was 24, grew up in a small Rust Belt town, and dropped out of community college to move to Manhattan. Her employment history was non-existent, but her romantic history was spectacular. She specialized in wealthy, middle-aged married men. Chris wasn't her first mark and likely wouldn't be her last. A professional gold digger, just as Nick suspected. More importantly, Ryan had found the address of the luxury condo Chris had bought for Mia, a $4 million penthouse in Tribeca, titled entirely in Mia Brooks's name. However, every single down payment and mortgage wire had come from the Montgomery Enterprise corporate accounts, classified under project consulting expenses, corporate embezzlement, and wire fraud. Throw it on the pile, Nick said, tapping the dossier. Charlotte, do you want to go see her? I think it needs to be you. We need more evidence that they are openly cohabitating to slam dunk the egregious marital fault. Truthfully, I didn't want to go. I didn't want to face the woman who had blown my family to pieces. But logic dictated I had to. I needed to shatter the last illusion I held onto, transforming my grief into absolute power. I had to see it with my own eyes. I'll go, I said firmly. The next day, I took an Uber to Tribeca. Nick waited in a coffee shop across the street, ready to intervene if things went south. I stood in front of the penthouse door on the top floor and took a deep breath, but what I saw glued to the door shattered my composure. It was a custom-engraved brass plaque that read, "The Montgomery Family." They weren't even trying to hide it. They were living openly as a married couple, building their new nest on the ashes of mine. My blood boiled. I pressed the doorbell hard. A few seconds later, the door swung open. Mia Brooks stood there in a silk designer robe that accentuated her baby bump, one hand resting on her hip. She looked me up and down, her expression instantly turning to scorn. She was prettier in person, a sharp, calculating kind of beauty. "Yeah, who are you looking for?" Her voice was cold and nasal. "I am Charlotte, Chris Montgomery's wife," I said, enunciating every single syllable. Mia let out a loud laugh. "Ah, so you're the famous wife. I've heard so much about you. What are you doing here? Chris isn't home. He's busy planning our family baby moon for me and his son. I didn't come looking for him. I came looking for you." Me and logist an eyebrow. What for? To pull my hair out. Oh, honey, what century are you living in? You should blame yourself for not knowing how to keep your man happy. Did you really think an older barren woman could compete with me? Every word she spat was like a razor dragging across my skin, but I didn't lose my temper. I stared at her stomach, then up to her eyes and smiled, a smile made of pure ice. "I didn't come here to pull your hair out. I came to give you 3 pieces of news. First, Chris and I are still legally married. Your public cohabitation is evidence of egregious marital fault, and this Montgomery family plaque makes a wonderful Exhibit A for the judge. Mia's arrogant smirk faltered slightly. Second, I took a step forward. This penthouse was purchased with embezzled corporate funds. Very soon, federal agents will be raiding this building. As the title holder of this property, I doubt you'll avoid being indicted as an accessory to fraud. What? What kind of garbage are you making up? Mia stammered. Her initial bravado had evaporated. And the third and final thing, I leaned in, lowering my voice so only the two of us could hear. Do you really think that baby in your belly is your golden ticket? Don't be so naive as to think it makes you the new Mrs. Montgomery. It means nothing to me. But when the Montgomery family finds out the actual truth about whose child that is, well, we'll see if you're still their precious heir. With that, I turned around and walked to the elevator. I didn't look back. I heard her shouting something frantic behind me, but I didn't care. I had planted the seed of paranoia in her mind. I had cracked her arrogant facade. In this confrontation, I was the victor, and this was only the prelude. After the encounter with Mia, strangely, I felt lighter. The hatred was still there, but it no longer consumed me blindly. It was now a controlled burn, a nuclear reactor powering my next move. The next morning, Nick and I went to the Chase executive branch in Manhattan. Acting on his legal authority, I ordered the immediate freezing of all joint accounts and every credit card attached to my name or our joint marital estate. Initially, the branch manager hesitated, but when Nick slapped down our marriage certificate, the drafted divorce petition, and proof of Chris's massive unauthorized withdrawals, they complied instantly. The remaining pennies in our accounts were moved to a sole proprietorship account in my name. That's step 1, cut the supply lines, Nick explained as we walked out. Without liquid cash, he can't maintain his baller lifestyle with his mistress, and the panic will set in immediately. Step 2 was even more aggressive. Using a highly respected independent forensic accounting firm recommended by my dad, Nick, served a formal demand letter to Montgomery Enterprise headquarters. It demanded the immediate surrender and audit of all corporate ledgers for the last 36 months. As the legal spouse of the CEO and an affected party of forged commercial debt, I had full legal standing to do so. The subpoena included a threat if the company failed to comply. We would file for a federal injunction to freeze all corporate operations. This was a direct strike at the financial jugular of the entire Montgomery dynasty. As Nick predicted, the fallout was instantaneous. That afternoon, while I was at my publishing house catching up on emails, my cell phone blew up. It was Chris. I let it ring several times before answering, putting on a groggy, sleepy voice. Hey, Charlotte, were you napping? Yeah, I was just a little tired, so I laid down. I yawned intentionally. What's wrong, honey? Charlotte, something massive just happened. Chris's voice had lost all its hypocritical sweetness. He was in full-blown panic mode. My Amex cards, all my cards are declining. I can't withdraw cash or pay for anything. Check your account and see if it's working. That's so weird, I feigned shock. Hold on, let me check. Oh my God, Chris, our joint account is locked too. What? Maybe there was a bank error, honey. Or maybe it was that massive investment opportunity you told me about. Maybe the bank flagged it as suspicious and locked the accounts for a security review. I smoothly bounced the responsibility right back onto his lap. Dead silence on the other end. I knew he was sweating bullets. The fake investment he had invented to cover his tracks was now blowing up in his face. Yeah, it's gotta be that, Chris said, his voice shaking. I'll call the bank and scream at them. Hey, Char, also. A forensic accounting firm showed up at the corporate office today, demanding our ledgers. Did you order an audit? An audit? I have no idea what you're talking about, I replied with wide-eyed innocence. Maybe it's a routine IRS thing. Our company is totally above board, right? Don't stress yourself out so much on your trip. Enjoy the beach. I'll hold down the fort here. I hung up and let a glacial smile spread across my face. I'll hold down the fort. Oh yes, I was going to take care of you and your family with extreme prejudice. I was going to chop off your tentacles one by one until you drowned in the swamp of greed and lies you built yourself. The first counterattack was a flawless victory. Now it was time to watch the fish thrash on the hook. Over the next few days, Chris didn't stop calling. Sometimes he tried to sweet-talk me. Other times he demanded explanations in a furious rage. But I played the clueless, trusting wife to perfection. Meanwhile, in New York, our vengeance machine was operating with ruthless efficiency. One evening, Nick called me, his voice urgent. Charlotte, breaking news. Chris is currently trying to transfer the title of the Greenwich estate into a newly formed, irrevocable family trust with his parents. My heart dropped. Why? What does that do? It shields the asset. Nick's voice was sharp. The estate is a marital asset, but the deed is currently solely in your name. If he transfers it into a Montgomery trust, they'll argue in court that it was legacy family property and fight you for it tooth and nail. They're trying to steal the house right out from under you. We have to stop it immediately. How do we do that? I asked, panicked. Relax. I anticipated this, Nick said confidently. And this is where we drop the Moab. Remember those forged commercial loan documents we pulled from his safe, yes? They aren't just proof of marital fraud. They are federal crimes. We aren't just going to block the house transfer. We are going to vaporize their identities. Vaporize their identities, I froze. It's devastating. We are going to turn the entire family into financial ghosts. They won't be able to buy a plane ticket, open a bank account, or even check into a hospital. For anyone else, it would take months. For us, it takes a phone call. Nick laughed. Your cousin Ryan is the key. The next morning, Nick, Ryan, and I walked into the FBI field office in Lower Manhattan. Ryan used his clearance to secure a sit-down with the special agent in charge of the white-collar division. In the solemn, sterile office, I laid out the facts, the embezzlement, the massive wire fraud, and the conspiracy to steal my real estate. Nick delivered the legal kill shots, but the true masterstroke was the dossier Ryan dropped on the desk. Special agent, these are the documents proving Christopher Montgomery repeatedly forged the signature of his wife, Charlotte Montgomery, to secure millions of dollars in fraudulent commercial credit lines. This demonstrates a systemic pattern of wire fraud, identity theft, and corporate embezzlement. Currently, the Montgomery family is attempting to fraudulently alter the deed of a $4,500,000 property. Given the flight risk and the scale of the ongoing fraud, we are formally requesting an immediate federal freeze on all Montgomery Enterprise assets and an emergency fraud alert placed on the Social Security numbers and passports of Christopher Anthony and Linda Montgomery. The special agent reviewed the dossier, his frown deepening with every page. He looked at me with a nod of professional respect. Understood. I'll personally take this to a federal magistrate for the injunctions. Don't worry, this will be executed by the book. Walking out into the bright Manhattan sun, I felt a chill. I had just dealt a lethal blow to the entire dynasty. I had stripped them of their basic ability to function in society. They would soon realize that without a valid SSN or a functioning credit profile, they were nobody. Their luxury vacation was about to devolve into a nightmare they couldn't even fathom. While the Montgomery family was drowning in St. Bart's, trapped with useless plastic and frozen passports, I decided to deliver the final psychological blow, one that would permanently salt the earth of their return. I want to sell the Greenwich house, I told Nick in his corner office. Nick nearly dropped his coffee mug. Excuse me, sell the house now. Yes. Right now, I said, leaving zero room for debate. It's my property. The deed is in my name. The courts haven't frozen my personal assets, only theirs. I want them to come back from the airport expecting their sanctuary only to find a stranger owning their front door. Nick looked at me with a mix of shock and profound admiration. You are downright diabolical, Charlotte. But I love it. It's a genius move. Not only do you liquidate a massive asset to fund your new life, but you obliterate their symbol of status. You'll break their spirit. But selling a $4,500,000 estate isn't something that happens overnight. My dad, who was sitting with us, interjected with concern. I'm not selling it for $4,500,000, I replied. I'm listing it for $3,500,000 cash with a strict 7-day closing contingency. There are Wall Street guys who need trophy properties instantly and won't blink at a cash discount. I want it done fast, before they can even file an injunction. The plan went live immediately. Through Nick's elite broker contacts, word spread quietly that a pristine Greenwich estate with a clean title was available for a massive cash discount. As expected, within 48 hours, an international tech CEO contacted us. He needed an impressive stateside residence immediately to host overseas investors. The location and the fire sale price were irresistible. A week later, I was sitting in a high-end title office signing the closing documents. As my pen scratched across the paper, a wave of complex emotions washed over me. That house was where I had built beautiful memories and dreamed of a happy family. But it was also the soil where the ultimate betrayal grew. Now, with my own hands, I was burning it to the ground. There was no regret, only the weightlessness of dropping a massive burden, $3,500,000. A colossal sum of untraceable cash landed securely in a protected LLC account Nick had set up. I had severed their road home. The Montgomerys hadn't just lost their money and their reputation. They had lost the roof over their heads. Officially, they were homeless. What would they feel when, exhausted and defeated, they arrived at their front door to find a new owner? The sensation of having absolutely everything ripped away. The exact same sensation they had given me. My revenge was executing flawlessly better than I could have ever hoped. Every move I made pushed the Montgomery family deeper into the abyss. I should have felt triumphant, satisfied. But strangely lately, my body felt completely drained. Every morning I woke up hit by sudden waves of nausea. I had no appetite and felt perpetually exhausted, wanting nothing more than to stay in bed. At first I chalked it up to stress. This war was taking a severe toll on my mind and body. But my mother, seeing me growing paler and thinner by the day, refused to ignore it. "Charlotte, you need to go see a doctor. I can't sleep worrying about you. I'm taking you to Park Avenue right now." To appease her, I went to a private OBGYN clinic in Manhattan. After drawing blood and running some tests, I waited nervously in the plush waiting room. Half an hour later, a nurse called me back. A doctor around my mother's age looked at me warmly, checked the iPad in her hands, and smiled. "Congratulations, Charlotte. You have absolutely nothing to worry about. In fact, it's wonderful news." My ears started ringing. "Wonderful news? What do you mean?" "You're pregnant," the doctor said, her smile widening. "About 5 weeks along. The gestational sac is perfectly implanted. The baby is growing healthy. Given your petite frame, the morning sickness is just hitting you a bit harder. I'll prescribe some prenatal vitamins and give you a diet plan." Pregnant. The word echoed in my skull like a gunshot. I was so paralyzed by shock I couldn't form a syllable. My mother beside me went from surprise to sheer joy and then to a look of deep, heartbreaking concern when she saw my face. I stopped hearing the doctor. In my mind, only one reality existed. A tiny life was growing inside me, a life that was the byproduct of this fraudulent, broken marriage. It was my child, but it was also Chris's child. My entire blueprint for vengeance, my hatred, my ironclad determination, I felt it all threatening to collapse in a split second. What was I supposed to do with this baby? Keep it, preserve the bloodline of the man who had trampled on my soul, and be forced to see his face in my child every single day. But the alternative, a shiver violently shook my body. It was my baby, my flesh and blood. I couldn't be that cruel. I walked out of the clinic like a zombie. My hand unconsciously gripped the ultrasound printout, a tiny black dot, yet it carried the weight of 1,000 tons. It changed everything. My war had just become infinitely more complex than I had ever imagined. I was no longer fighting just for myself. I had to decide the fate of an innocent life. The road ahead had suddenly grown darker and more terrifying than ever. The days following the discovery of my pregnancy were the darkest. I locked myself in my bedroom at my parents' house, refusing to see anyone, not even them. The internal conflict was ripping me apart. On one hand, a fierce maternal instinct was already blooming, demanding I protect the tiny life inside me. On the other, logic screamed that this child was a mistake, a permanent tether to the Montgomery family that could never be severed. My master plan was reaching its climax, but this baby made me hesitate. What was I supposed to do? While I was drowning in my own despair, my phone rang. An unknown number. I didn't want to answer, so I ignored it. But the number called back, again and again. Finally fed up, I swiped to answer, fully prepared to curse out whoever was on the other end. "Hello, is this Charlotte Montgomery?" The voice on the other end belonged to an older woman, deep, slightly raspy. "Yes." "Who is this?" I asked defensively. "My name is Beatrice Montgomery. I am Chris's aunt." I froze. Chris's aunt. No one in the Montgomery family had ever mentioned her. To my knowledge, my father-in-law, Anthony, was an only child. As if reading my mind, the woman continued, "You're surprised. My brother Anthony severed ties with me over 20 years ago. He prefers the world believe I don't exist. And why are you calling me?" I remained suspicious. "Because I've been watching your moves over the last week," Beatrice said. "I know about Chris's infidelity. I know how his entire family humiliated you. You've played a magnificent game, Charlotte. The frozen bank accounts, the federal ID flags, the sale of the Greenwich estate. You are utterly ruthless. You remind me of myself when I was your age." There was a well of deep bitterness in her voice. "I'm calling you because I want to help you. They say the enemy of my enemy is my friend. And you and I share a common enemy, my brother's family. Why should I trust you? I'm not asking you to trust me blindly. Let's meet first," she said. I have something highly sensitive to show you, something that will ensure the Montgomery family never rises from the ashes. I'll wait for you tonight at 8 p.m. at the Refuge, a coffee shop in the West Village." With that, she hung up. I sat in bed stunned. My mind was a mess. A blood aunt who hadn't spoken to them in 2 decades suddenly appears to help me nuke her own family. It sounded like a trap. But at this stage in the game, I had nothing left to lose. I decided to go. At 8 p.m. on the dot, I walked into the Refuge, a dim, quiet cafe tucked away in Manhattan. Beatrice was already sitting at a corner booth. She looked to be in her 60s with striking silver hair, but her eyes were sharp, projecting a mix of hardened experience and undeniable strength. She looked nothing like my father-in-law. The moment I sat down, she skipped the pleasantries and placed a battered leather briefcase on the table. "Inside this are the original, unedited financial ledgers of the Montgomery Enterprise," she said. "The company I founded alongside my brother. When it started generating massive profits, he illegally forced me out and stole my shares. In here is the hard proof of his offshore tax evasion, the shell companies he used to launder money, and the embezzlement he used to build his empire. You hand this to the feds, and my brother will spend the rest of his natural life in federal prison." In shock, I flipped through the documents. Account numbers, signatures, fraudulent contracts, irrefutable smoking gun evidence. This alone was enough to bury Anthony forever. "But that is not the most interesting part," Beatrice said, her gaze turning complex. She slid a yellowed, faded piece of paper across the table. "This is the kill shot." I picked up the paper. It was a medical laboratory report. A DNA test. Subjects Anthony Montgomery. Christopher Montgomery. Result 0%. Probability of paternity. I felt like my brain short-circuited. Chris isn't Anthony's biological son." "Exactly," Beatrice said, anticipating my shock. "Chris is the product of an affair my dear sister-in-law Linda had with an old flame. My brother found out, but his ego was too massive to face a public scandal, and he desperately needed an heir to project the image of a perfect dynasty. So he agreed to raise the bastard as his own, but deep down he always despised the boy. That's why he was always so tyrannical and emotionally abusive toward Chris. This is the darkest, most shameful secret of the Montgomery family. The humiliation Anthony has spent his life trying to bury." Beatrice looked at me intently. "I am handing you the sword, Charlotte. How you swing it is entirely up to you." I looked back and forth between the hardened woman in front of me and the devastating weapons in my hands. The confusion and hesitation I had felt regarding my pregnancy vanished in an instant, replaced by a terrifying, ice-cold resolve. Beatrice had handed me the sharpest blade in existence, and I was going to use it to cut the head off the snake. The Montgomery family's vacation ended in absolute catastrophe. They didn't fly back first class as they had departed. They flew back on a budget commercial red-eye after being forced to beg friends for wire transfers just to pay the hotel bill. Their bank accounts were frozen solid, their credit cards were useless plastic, and their passports had triggered secondary screenings at customs. They returned to New York consumed by exhaustion, humiliation, and utter paranoia. The first massive shock hit when their Uber pulled up to the Greenwich estate. The familiar wrought iron gates were open, and worse, a moving truck was parked in the driveway and strangers were carrying furniture inside. "What the hell is this?" Anthony Montgomery roared, jumping out of the car. "Who do you think you are breaking into my property?" The new owner, the tech CEO, looked at him like he was insane. "Your property? I think you're confused, buddy. This is my house. I just closed on it in cash. The deed is in my name." "Bought it from who?" Linda screamed, her face as pale as wax. "The legal owner." "Charlotte Montgomery," the man replied bluntly. The name Charlotte dropped on the family like an atomic bomb. Chris stood completely paralyzed, looking as though his brain had snapped. That woman actually sold the house. She sold the multi-million-dollar estate right out from under us. Humiliated and homeless, the elite Montgomerys were forced to check into a cheap motel off the highway. The second shock hit when Anthony tried to wire funds from a hidden offshore account and was denied. Upon visiting a local bank branch, he was informed that due to an ongoing federal investigation, the Social Security numbers of the entire family had been flagged for massive fraud, legally freezing them out of the U.S. banking system. Without a home, without a dime, and legally radioactive, their desperation and fury reached a boiling point. In the midst of their insanity, they could only focus on one person, me, the architect of their destruction. "I have to find that bitch. I will tear her apart with my bare hands," Linda shrieked in the dingy motel room. Chris, who had been in a catatonic state of shock for days, was now consumed by a rabid frenzy. He couldn't compute how his submissive, loving wife had orchestrated an attack this sophisticated and lethal. There had to be someone pulling her strings, but regardless, he was going to find me and force me to undo it all. Fine. We go to her publishing house, Chris snarled, grinding his teeth. We confront her in front of her bosses. We demand she reverse the trusts and drop whatever insane lawsuits she filed. What they didn't know was that this was exactly what I was waiting for. The next morning, I went to work at my Manhattan publishing house like any other day. But today, I was ready. Nick had positioned 2 plainclothes private security contractors in the lobby. My cousin Ryan had already coordinated with the NYPD and his federal task force. They were waiting in unmarked cars down the block, ready to breach the moment he gave the signal. In the executive boardroom on my floor, a projector was hooked up to my laptop. On that laptop was every piece of evidence. I had built the perfect slaughterhouse, and the dumb bleeding pigs were sprinting right toward the door. I sat in my office sipping herbal tea to steady my nerves. My mind was a calm, glassy lake. The curtain was rising on the final act. I was the director, and the Montgomery family were the tragic stars of their own demise. Just before the chaos started, I got a text from cousin Ryan. Got the results. A little bonus gift for your grand finale. What results? I texted back, my heart accelerating. Days earlier, after planting the seed of doubt in Mia's head at her Tribeca penthouse, I had asked Ryan to covertly run a paternity test. We used DNA from Chris's hairbrush, a stray hair from his brother Jonathan's coat, and a discarded soda can Mia had thrown away. It was highly unorthodox, but in a war of annihilation, you don't play by the rules. Ryan's text continued, "Sit down for this. The baby that gold digger is carrying, it's not Chris's." I froze. Not Chris's, then who's Jonathan's? Another shockwave hit me, but this time it didn't bring pain. On the contrary, I felt a wave of terrifying cinematic satisfaction. This family tragedy possessed a plot twist, so twisted it belonged in a soap opera. The beloved mistress, the vessel of the highly anticipated Montgomery heir, was the product of incestuous betrayal. The older brother was sleeping with the younger brother's mistress. This entire family was rotting from the inside out. "Thank you, Ryan. That is the greatest gift you could have given me," I texted back. "Send the PDF immediately." The file popped up on my screen. The scientific jargon and percentages inside that document were the death warrant for Chris's ego and the family's legacy. This was the weapon of mass destruction. I now held everything in the palm of my hand: the financial fraud, the embezzlement, the secret audio recordings, and the ultimate bloodline betrayals. I calmly dragged the DNA report into a folder on my desktop labeled Finale. Everything was locked and loaded. I checked my reflection in the glass window. Today I was wearing a tailored burgundy pantsuit, the color of power, the color of blood. My makeup was immaculate, hiding any trace of pregnancy fatigue, projecting only an aura of lethal sharpness. I was no longer the victim. Today I was the executioner. I called for an emergency meeting, asking the executive board and the department heads to gather in the main conference room. I told them it was a personal matter that could briefly impact the company's security and invited them to witness it. Curiosity packed the room. I wanted everyone to witness the fall of the Montgomerys. I wanted them to burn in the fires of public humiliation. The trap was set, the bait was bleeding, and the rabid beasts charged in. Around 10 a.m., the Montgomery family stormed the floor. Bypassing reception, they burst into my department, turning the quiet publishing floor into a chaotic circus. Leading the pack was Chris, his face red with sleep deprivation and rage, followed by his parents, his brother Jonathan, and Jonathan's wife. "Charlotte, get out here right now," Chris roared, completely ignoring the horrified stares of my colleagues. I stepped out of my office calmly and met his deranged gaze. "Why all the screaming, mister? Montgomery, don't you dare play dumb with me, you bitch." My mother-in-law lunged forward to slap me, but she was instantly intercepted and shoved back by the 2 private security guards. "What the hell did you do to us?" Chris screamed, veins bulging in his neck. "Why is the house sold? Why are our accounts frozen? Why did the feds flag our social security numbers?" I smiled softly. "I think those questions are best answered in the boardroom. There are too many people in the hallway. Besides, I have a presentation I've been dying to show you." Without waiting for a response, I walked into the glass-walled boardroom where the executives were seated. The Montgomerys, confused but blinded by rage, piled in after me. Once the doors closed, I picked up the projector remote and stepped to the head of the table. "Montgomery family, welcome," I began, my voice echoing off the glass. "I've gathered you all here today to debut a short tragedy starring your very own family. The title of this piece is Betrayal." I clicked the remote. The massive screen illuminated, displaying a high-resolution collage of Chris and Mia kissing and drinking in St. Bart's. A collective gasp rippled through my colleagues. Chris's face went the color of chalk. Act 1 adultery, I announced in a clinical, deadpan tone. Christopher Montgomery, during our legal marriage, maintained a public affair with Mia Brooks and impregnated her. The entire Montgomery family, fully aware of this fact, concealed it, funded it, and celebrated it behind my back. I clicked the button again. The screen shifted to the Chase Bank statements and the commercial loan contracts bearing my forged signature. Act 2 fraud. Christopher embezzled corporate funds, drained marital assets, and forged my signature to fraudulently secure millions in commercial credit. Furthermore, it is mathematically impossible that the CEO, Anthony Montgomery, was unaware of this corporate embezzlement. My father-in-law jumped up, his face purple. You insolent little. How dare you defame me? Defame you. I laughed, a sharp, cold sound. Let's listen to Exhibit A. I pressed a key on my laptop and Linda's voice blasted through the boardroom speakers. Sign it. We're offering you an $800,000 condo in Queens. Do not make me do this the hard way. That little department head job you love so much, I can make a few calls and have you blacklisted from the industry tomorrow. The entire room stopped breathing. Linda wobbled on her feet and collapsed into a chair, looking like she was going to vomit. And now the main event, I said, locking eyes with Chris. You were so incredibly proud of your future son, weren't you, Chris? The highly anticipated heir to the Montgomery dynasty. I clicked the remote. The FBI DNA report flashed onto the screen. I read it aloud, syllable by agonizing syllable. Paternity test results. Subjects Jonathan Montgomery and the unborn child of Mia Brooks. Conclusion: probability of paternity is 99.9%. The entire Montgomery family turned to stone. Chris slowly turned his head to stare at his older brother, his expression morphing from disbelief into absolute homicidal insanity. Next to them, Jonathan's wife literally fainted, hitting the carpet with a thud. But wait, we aren't quite finished, I said, my voice dropping to a terrifying whisper. There is one final secret. A secret Anthony Montgomery has guarded for 30 years. I clicked to the final slide, Aunt Beatrice's faded DNA test. Christopher, that father who always belittled you, who treated you like garbage. He isn't your biological father. You are the product of your mother's affair. That was the breaking point. The dam shattered. Chris let out a guttural, animalistic scream and lunged across the mahogany table, hands outstretched to strangle me. I'm going to kill you. Before his fingers even grazed my jacket, the boardroom doors blew open. NYPD, FBI. Nobody move. Cousin Ryan led the charge, tackling Chris to the ground and violently ratcheting handcuffs onto his wrists. Christopher Montgomery, you are under arrest for attempted assault, federal wire fraud, and identity theft. Anthony Montgomery, Jonathan Montgomery, Linda Montgomery, you are all coming downtown for questioning regarding corporate embezzlement, extortion, and conspiracy to commit bank fraud. The entire family was dragged out in handcuffs, humiliated in front of Manhattan's publishing elite. The play was over. As I watched them get hauled into the elevator, my hand unconsciously drifted to rest on my stomach. The hurricane had passed, and I was the sole survivor. The incident at the publishing house detonated like a nuclear bomb in the press. A video of the confrontation, secretly recorded on a phone by one of the executives, was accidentally leaked to social media. Overnight, my story became a national obsession. Major digital outlets splashed the headlines: Manhattan executive exposes husband's fraud mistress and incestuous dynasty in epic boardroom takedown. The media storm was terrifying, but instead of crushing me, it elevated me. The court of public opinion was unequivocally on my side. The internet dubbed me the Steel Rose, praising my tactical genius and unbreakable resolve. Women across the country were outraged by the Montgomerys' cruelty and cheered my methodical destruction of their empire. In the eye of the hurricane, I opted for absolute silence. I took an extended leave of absence from the publishing house, packed up, and moved back to my parents' brownstone in Brooklyn to escape the paparazzi. The only thing that mattered to me now was the tiny life growing inside me. One night, I was sitting in the living room with my parents. My dad, after reading an op-ed about me in the New York Times, looked at me for a long time. "Sweetheart, what are you going to do about the baby?" he asked, his voice gentle. I stroked my slight bump in silence. My mother reached out and held my hand, her eyes overflowing with unconditional love. "Whatever you decide, Charlotte, your father and I are with you. If you want to keep him, we will help you raise him. He is our grandson, our blood. He holds no blame for the sins of his father." My mother's words finally broke the dam, and tears slipped down my cheeks. She was right. The baby was innocent. The monsters were the adults. I had executed my revenge. I had made the guilty pay in blood and ruin. I could not out of my own lingering bitterness sentence an innocent life to death. I'm keeping him, I said, my voice finding its steel once more, and I am going to raise him to be an incredible, kind man. He is my son, mine alone. My dad nodded, a profound smile of relief on his face. Well decided. My little girl has become a titan. Meanwhile, the other key player in this tragedy was making her own moves. Mia Brooks, upon seeing the leaked boardroom video and realizing the Montgomery empire was financially obliterated, didn't hesitate for a second. With the reflexes of a seasoned grifter, she liquidated whatever luxury bags and jewelry she could, stuffed a duffel bag with cash, and vanished into thin air. When federal agents raided the Tribeca penthouse, they found an empty apartment and the Montgomery family brass plaque discarded in the trash. She had fled, taking the stolen money and a baby with a completely chaotic future, leaving nothing but devastation for the men who had burned their lives down for her. A few weeks later, when the media circus finally died down, I received a letter from the Metropolitan Correctional Center. It was from Chris. He begged me to visit him. Nick advised me to throw it in the fire, but I felt differently. To permanently close the door on the past, I needed to face him one last time. I went to the federal holding facility on a gloomy Thursday. I sat in the sterile visiting room, staring through the thick plexiglass. A few minutes later, Chris was escorted out. I barely recognized him. The arrogant, impeccably groomed CEO was gone, replaced by a hollowed-out inmate in a beige jumpsuit. His head was shaved, his eyes sunken from terror and insomnia. When he saw me, he slammed his hands against the glass. A pathetic glimmer of hope sparked in his dead eyes. "Charlotte, you came. I knew you'd come," he rasped. I sat there, my face an unreadable mask. "Charlotte, I'm so sorry." Chris broke down, sobbing hysterically. "I know nothing I say means a damn thing now, but I am so sorry. I was a monster. I was the biggest piece of trash on earth. I betrayed you. I broke you. Curse at me, scream at me, whatever you want, but please, please forgive me." "Forgive you," I smiled, a cold, empty smile. "Do you think my forgiveness changes anything, Chris? Does it undo the psychological torture you put me through? Does it unfreeze your assets or spring your father from federal prison? I don't think so." Chris shook his head in absolute despair. "I don't even have the right to ask. I needed to see you to tell you one thing." His gaze dropped to my stomach, a complex agony washing over his face. "The baby. You kept it right." I didn't answer. I just stared at him. "Charlotte, please," he begged, pressing his forehead against the plexiglass. "Take care of our son. He didn't do anything wrong. He is my blood. Please give me the chance to be a father to him, even if it's from behind bars. When I get out, I will work like a dog for the rest of my life to provide for both of you." "My son," I corrected him, my voice dropping the temperature in the room. "This baby is my son. He has absolutely nothing to do with you or the Montgomery family. You are a ghost to him." Chris recoiled as if I had shot him, but then he nodded bitterly. "Yes, your son. As long as you keep him safe, that's all I care about." He hesitated for a second, then leaned closer to the glass, lowering his voice to a frantic whisper. "Charlotte, there's one more thing. My aunt, Beatrice." I frowned. "Be careful with that woman," Chris said, pure terror in his eyes. "She isn't the benevolent savior you think she is. She despises my father, yes, but she didn't help you out of the goodness of her heart. She used you to execute a hostile takeover of the corporate assets while they were frozen. Her cruelty makes my father look like a saint. Watch your back, Charlotte. Don't become her next pawn." Just as he finished speaking, the buzzer blared. Visiting hours were over. As the guards hauled him away by his biceps, Chris kept twisting his neck to look at me, mouthing the words, "Be careful." I sat alone in the echoing room, lost in thought. It was a warning from a proven sociopath, but it planted a dark seed in my mind. Who exactly was Beatrice? What had I unleashed? But almost instantly I shook my head, clearing the paranoia away. Whoever she was, whatever her corporate ambitions were, it didn't matter. My war was over. From this day forward, I lived only for myself and my child, leaving the ashes of the past permanently on the other side of that bulletproof glass. 1 year later, I was sitting on the balcony of a beautiful, sun-drenched cottage overlooking the Pacific Ocean in Carmel-by-the-Sea, California. The salty sea breeze gently rustled my hair, bringing with it a profound, unbelievable sense of peace. New York, with its concrete canyons and traumatic memories, was a lifetime away. I had chosen this quiet, artistic coastal town to build my new empire. A soft baby's cry from the nursery pulled me from my thoughts. I smiled and walked inside. In a pristine white crib, a tiny angel was kicking his feet. He had my eyes large, dark, and observant, and my button nose. I named him Asher, hoping his life would always be filled with happiness and light. The birth of Asher had healed the deepest, darkest wounds in my soul. Watching him sleep peacefully, seeing his innocent, toothless smile, I knew that choosing to keep him was the greatest victory of my life. After the dust settled, I had rebuilt my life using the $3,500,000 from the Greenwich estate. I invested a portion into high-yield funds, bought this cottage in Carmel, and used the rest of my time to write. I poured every ounce of my trauma, my rage, my legal warfare, and my ultimate rebirth into a memoir. I titled it Rising from the Ashes. Unexpectedly, it became a cultural phenomenon. It connected with millions of women trapped in abusive or deceitful marriages. Rising from the Ashes hit Hasshone on the New York Times bestseller list and stayed there for months. I transitioned overnight from a publishing executive to a renowned author and a symbol of female empowerment. Using the massive royalties from the book, I fulfilled another dream. I founded a nonprofit organization named the Inner Light Foundation, dedicated to providing pro bono legal counsel, forensic accounting, and psychological support for women navigating high-conflict divorces and financial abuse. The foundation grew rapidly, becoming a beacon of hope for shattered lives across the country. As for the Montgomery family, they paid the ultimate price. Anthony Montgomery was convicted and sentenced to 15 years in federal prison for tax evasion, wire fraud, and money laundering. The Montgomery enterprise was completely liquidated by the DOJ to pay back creditors and fines. Chris was sentenced to 5 years for commercial bank fraud, identity theft, and attempted assault. Jonathan received 3 years of probation. Linda Montgomery, unable to cope with the loss of her wealth and status, suffered a total psychiatric break and was placed in a care facility. The once untouchable dynasty had been scrubbed from the earth. I didn't care about them anymore. My universe consisted only of Asher, my writing, and the Inner Light Foundation. In that simplicity, I found my true purpose. One weekend, the Inner Light Foundation hosted a massive charity gala at a luxury resort in nearby Monterey. As the founder, I was busy shaking hands with philanthropists and politicians. Asher, who had just turned 1, was being carried around by my mother, who absolutely refused to put him down. He was the star of the gala. Everyone was cooing over him in his tiny tuxedo. While I was chatting with some sponsors, I heard a familiar voice behind me. "Charlotte, is that you?" I turned around and saw a tall, handsome man with kind eyes wearing a sharp suit and glasses. He gave me a warm, somewhat shy smile. My mind went blank for a second before it clicked. "Lucas, oh my God, it is you," he laughed, pulling me into a gentle hug. "I never expected to run into you here. I read your book, Charlotte. It was breathtaking. I had no idea what you went through. You are incredibly brave." Lucas was an old college friend from undergrad. He was always the quiet, sweet guy who helped me study in the library and walked me to my dorm. We had lost touch after graduation, and who could have predicted we'd reconnect on the West Coast a decade later? He was now a successful architect in Monterey, managing the design of a new eco-resort, and had bought a ticket to the gala because he supported the cause. We talked for hours about life, our careers, and how much we had changed. Lucas was incredibly engaging, yet completely grounded. Whenever he looked at me and at Asher, his gaze was filled with genuine warmth and respect. He didn't pry into my traumatic past. He just listened, validating my peace. That night, while I was putting Asher to sleep in his crib, my phone buzzed. It was an email from the federal inmate messaging system. "Sender Christopher Montgomery. Message, I'm up for parole soon. Could you please send a photo of the boy? I miss him so much." I stared at the screen for a moment, feeling absolutely nothing. No anger, no sadness, just indifference. I permanently deleted the message and blocked the sender. To me, that man was dead. A few days later, Lucas came to visit us at the Carmel cottage. He didn't bring extravagant flowers or try to impress me with expensive gifts. Instead, he brought a beautiful hand-carved wooden architectural block set he had made himself for Asher. The baby instantly fell in love with it, refusing to let it go. Lucas sat down on the living room rug cross-legged and patiently built towers with my son. The scene was so warm, so incredibly peaceful. Lucas looked up from the blocks, his eyes meeting mine, and smiled softly. "Charlotte, I know it might be too soon, and I don't want to overstep, But if you're okay with it, I'd really love to come visit you two more often." I looked at him, and then at Asher, who was giggling uncontrollably as a wooden tower tumbled down. I felt a warm golden current thaw the very last piece of ice in my heart. I smiled, a true, genuine smile, and nodded. "I'd like that, Lucas. I'd like that a lot." A new morning was dawning over the California coast. A morning with no storms, no lies, and no shadows. Just the golden light of the sun, the endless blue of the Pacific, and the quiet promise of a new, complete, and hard-earned happiness.